Welcome to SheBoss. I am thrilled today to have Deborah McGee joining us. She is the president and CEO of PZI Consulting, but there is so much more that is to be discovered about this woman who I've had the absolute pleasure of getting to know over the past couple of weeks. So thank you so much for joining us
Thanks
today.
for having me.
Absolutely. So Deborah and I have been in similar circles for quite some time. But the more I've learned about you and your background and really the roles that you have played, I was blown away to hear about your international impact and just the depth of experience that you have working across different cultures and organizations and looking at things in such an intentional and strategic way that has helped shape businesses that are huge, huge. And when I think about, a lot of the women that we have on the show are heavily involved in what we do in our community in North Alabama, and most certainly, respected beyond this area. But you have touched and have been involved across the world and have lived in many countries and has moved
many times,
several times. And so just getting to know your story, I was just blown away at just the depth of it, honestly. And it's so interesting to hear. So we're going to get to all of that. But I would love to just, again, welcome you to SheBoss and let's just start a little bit about you and your background and where you're from. And then we'll kind of follow your journey from there.
Perfect. Where am I from? That's always an interesting question. So I'm a retired military spouse. So that question always comes with, well, I started here and I went there and now I'm here. But no, I'm a South Carolina girl.
Okay.
So I'm a South Carolinian. So whenever that goes, say the word Carolina, it always comes out. But so I started there. My husband and I got married very young and went into the military early and lived, like I said, all over the world. So when I came to Huntsville I guess I've been in Huntsville now 13 years. I was in Atlanta at the time, but also working in Korea. So I spent half my time in Korea and half my time in Atlanta. But I am a Southern gal. So whenever my husband got ready to retire from the military, he goes, well, where do we want to live? Because we've lived all over the world. I said, well, it must be in the South, and it must be near water because I am sick to death of deserts. So never again. And here we are. Lake Guntersville, we are.
Yeah, that's perfect. And Lake Guntersville is beautiful
here.
Beautiful. Feeds off of the Tennessee River and just is such a
gorgeous.
Beautiful area.
So blessed.
Yeah,
so blessed.
It is beautiful. So your background is in accounting and financial and you're a CPA by trade and heavy in, HR and doing all sorts of things. So what sort of started that career path for you? What was it that really influenced you to take that path? And then how did that evolve?
As a teenager, honestly, in high school, because I'm so old. And, back in high school, I think I took a bookkeeping course. And I was just like, wow, this really makes sense. I really kind of like this. So when it was time to go to college, it's like, well, I want to go to be an accountant. I think that's what I want to do. Didn't really know much about being a CPA. And my path to getting my CPA was very long and very sordid because I am a military spouse. And I got married very early. So it actually took me 7 years in 5 different universities just to get that 4-year accounting degree.
Wow.
Because of constantly moving.
Yeah.
And having to restart and having to wait for residency, et cetera. And so, but I did finally get my accounting degree. And then I decided, well, okay, I want to be a CPA, but I don't know where. So I had 4 CPA licenses because where am I going to wind up at? I'm not sure. So I started off in California and then Texas and South Carolina. And eventually ended up in Virginia. And I was in the accounting world, so I was fortunate enough to work with one of the Big Four, now Big Four, back when I started, Big 10, accounting firms, Arthur Andersen's, not there anymore, and started doing audit and tax, and I loved it. And then we went to Germany and was fortunate enough again to get another position with Arthur Andersen in Frankfurt, Germany, doing expatriate taxation. And that's what started my international career.
Yeah. Did you ever have the desire to want to do international
No,
when you kind of started out?
Didn't know what it was.
So, but because of the military in your family, I mean, that just naturally brought you over there. It naturally
came. So a friend of mine also worked for the same firm I worked for. He called up one of her friends, one of the partners, and said, hey, a former colleague of ours is coming to Germany. Is there anything you guys can do to help her? I didn't think I was going to work in Germany. And sure enough, there was a position, and they hired me, and I started doing expatriate taxation. Again, didn't know the first thing about tax. I was in audit.
Yeah.
So, I was probably in that field for 13 years.
Wow.
Yeah, I had every intentions of being a, Big Four partner. My goal was to have a corner office in Atlanta for a Big Four accounting firm. Fast forward, I did actually have a corner office in Atlanta for a major corporation. So dreams do come true, just in a different way sometimes.
Yeah, yeah. So what was it about having that corporate experience that eventually kind of caused you to
Switch over.
to switch over and make that leap?
Because it's a big switch from finance and accounting to human resources.
Yeah.
In that field, particularly in the international HR field, you deal a lot with international taxation, individuals' tax returns, having to pay taxes in different locations. And that's what I did for 13 years. So I was in international executive services with KPMG when I left the field, and I was a senior manager for KPMG. So my clients were like Marriott on a national account, Lockheed Martin was mine, Deutsche Bank.
Wow.
So those were the big clients that I was used to dealing with, and all their expatriates. So it was kind of a natural fit when Sarbanes-Oxley came out and accounting wasn't going to be fun and strategic anymore. I said, let's get out of here. So a friend of mine, one of the VP over at Lafarge, said, hey, if you ever want to leave, because they were a client of mine, please come to us. And so I did. And that's how I switched over to human resources.
And it was just a natural segue based on the international experience that you had. Wow. What would you say are some of the things from your financial background really brought great value and benefit in that space that maybe others didn't have?
Understanding the bottom line, I'm passionate about people. Our whole company, PCI, people, zealously interconnected. So I'm passionate about people, and I always have been. But I'm a financial person, and there's always the bottom line.
Yeah.
And so helping organizations to understand the risk that they're putting financially, compliance-wise, their people in is really kind of what I think made me valuable to Lafarge.
Yeah.
And then later to Doosan.
Yeah. So talk, your background, lends that there was a little bit of a corporate pivot that you took to really get...
Big pivot.
Yeah, yeah. So what was it that sort of instilled you to, think about PZI and start that? And the company name, I think, is so interesting. People zealously interconnected. Which is really unique and something that you don't hear often. You really don't. So I would love to hear what's kind of spurred that in you and what does that mean?
Well, I never planned to start a company. I don't know. Maybe there are people out there who's like, absolutely, I want to go be an entrepreneur and I want to, do this, because it sounds really great when you're in a major corporation, and you're tired of the bureaucracy and I could do this better on my own.
Right.
Until you're doing it on your own.
Okay. Like you get weekends off, all this flexibility.
And it's like, what do you mean I don't have an IT department to come take care of the computer? I don't know how it works. IT
department, right? You have to figure that out.
He's like, marketing? How do I do that? So all those things kind of came into play. And honestly, at Doosan, I was the global head of international human resources. So I came in and designed that organization. So Doosan had bought 3 divisions of Ingersoll Rand for actually $5 billion. So it was a major, major purchase, and they had to start everything up from the ground up. And they knew they needed an international HR department because they're a global company. Yeah. So I came in and actually designed that entire department, which later went into a function, which later went into a center of excellence with about 2,500 expatriates in 30 countries by the time I left.
Wow!
So I had a team of 16 when I left in 4 different regions, and we had set up all processes. Everything was centralized. It was beautiful. And like all businesses, we centralize, we decentralize. We centralize, we decentralize. It was time to decentralize. And so my position was going away. So either I could take a demotion and stay and fire all my team, by the way, or I could leave. And I'm like, you know what? I think I'm going to go to Alabama. I'm going to go sit on the lake at Lake Edwardsville and hang out. And that was my plan. I never planned to start a company. Yeah. Although people had told me I should, it's a very unique niche. It's such a unique niche that it's not something that's ever been done before to have this big of an outsourcing that does everything, not just tax or relocation or payroll. It does all of it.
Right.
And so, I started and I really felt that God led me to do that.
Yeah.
I took 6 months off.
Okay, I was going to ask that
I
question.
took time off. Oh, I did.
How long? Yeah.
I did.
So when you left, I mean, did you have that thought or was it over time?
It was over time.
It was over time. Okay.
I did not plan. I mean, I'm going to Huntsville, Alabama. I didn't even think there was anything international here in Huntsville, Alabama. So
yeah,
that was my plan. Truly, I thought I might become a Pilates instructor. I spent a lot of time at the gym. I thought that would be fun. And as I really took the time to learn more about me, I took that 6 months. I did the ballroom dance classes. I did the gourmet cooking. You
had your time.
I had the time of yes, all me.
Yeah.
And but I was really spending a lot more time on my faith and spending time reading my Bible every morning. And the more I read, it just became clearer and clearer and clearer. It's like, again, I didn't plan to start a company. And after about 6 months, I got a little bored. I was like, okay, I just need to put on a business suit and go to a luncheon somewhere. And I was trying to find a human resources group or an accounting group or something in Huntsville. I'm sure there was something like that in Huntsville, Alabama. And I eventually did find the NASHR, North Alabama Human Resources Management Group here. And I went to a meeting there to do nothing more than just to meet some business people.
Yeah.
And the person I sat with happened to be the HR director at EFI Automotive. And as we were talking, she was having some international issues. And it's like, oh, no, don't do that. And next I knew, she became my first client here in Huntsville.
That's exciting. That just happened like
just
that,
happened.
Right? Yeah.
It just happened.
Did she have to give you some convincing in that process? Or did you just recognize, you kind of flexed a muscle that you really hadn't? Yeah.
I just did not know how much to charge. How do you set that up?
Yeah.
Because when you're working inside of a corporation and you're a business partner with your corporation, you don't charge for it.
Yeah.
But when you come out and you're in a consulting, that's all I thought we'd ever do is just some consulting.
Mm-hmm.
How do you do that? And so I had to learn all that pieces too.
Yeah. I would be curious if you're willing to share maybe some of the stumbling blocks that you faced in that first year or so, just of starting that out. I mean, there's so many things you don't know what you don't know. And as we discovered during coffee, we have a lot in common, just different things throughout our life where had no intention of doing anything. Life just happens to you. And then all of a sudden, you're faced with a decision, right?
Right.
And so you don't know what you don't know, which I think is part of the beauty of it.
Right.
Like, had I known,
just
know what I mean?
Say yes.
Right.
I do a speech on that. Just say yes.
But I love that though so much. But I'd be curious, kind of reflecting and looking back, what were some of those things, maybe those mistakes that you made that maybe I'm sure you learned a ton from?
Oh, I learned a ton. I think, and I tell my staff this too, you only learn from mistakes. You never learn from successes. So if my staff never makes a mistake, that's a problem because they're not learning.
Yeah.
They're just doing the same thing over and over. I always joke that just don't lose as a client. Okay. But other than that, please make mistakes because I want you to grow. I want you to learn. And when I was first starting out, I mean, I had years before when I was with KPMG and Anderson, I had been a consultant. I knew what the big guys charged, but now I'm on my own.
Yeah.
Who would pay me? I used to joke that when I went to Lafarge, I would tell them, I said, you used to pay like $650 an hour for me. And now you don't even want to listen to what I'm saying.
Right.
You got me for free, basically, and you used to pay all this money for me. So trying to, use some of that, I think, was how I figured out a lot of that processes. I tell anyone who's starting a business, especially here in Huntsville, Alabama, please go to the Catalyst. Used to be the Women's Business Center. Yeah. That's how I started with Joanne Randolph, and she found me. I forget how we even met at a luncheon somewhere, and she's like, "You need to start coming to our girls just having luncheon." It's like, okay, sure, so I'll do that. And I remember sitting around with all these amazing women CEOs and going, "When do you know it's time to stop going to Starbucks to meet your clients?" Because that's what I was doing. Right. I lived in Gunnersville. I didn't have an office. And so she said, "Hey, come with me. I'm moving over to BizTech back in the day. And there's an office over there for you." So that's how that happened.
That is amazing. The Catalyst Center for Business and Entrepreneurship here is a huge just ignition point for so many individuals looking to start a business. They offer coaching, mentorship, workshops, certificate, like you name it, they've got it.
Plenty of great coaches.
So, great coaches was a huge, I tapped into one of their programs as well. And that was the one thing that I will never forget was it was like, hey, you need to get a lawyer or you need to get an accountant. The accountant piece was probably the biggest, was the accountant and the lawyer. And again, you just don't know what you don't know, right?
Exactly.
And so resources like that are critical. I was going to ask you what resources you leaned on here locally for that. And that sounds like a huge part of it.
It was. Yeah. It really was. And I think, a lot of that helping because when you start a business, you don't have any money to pay for all this, right?
Like it's just not there yet.
It's not there
right?
yet. So how do you do all this and how do you figure it out? And so they're great.
Yeah. So talk to us a little bit more about PZI now specifically, because what was that one client of someone you had lunch with that started out is now a massive organization. You employ, how many people are employed with PZI? And
so we have globally about 250 people employed in probably 20 plus countries. We're in, last count, I think we're in 30 something states. We can work in all 50 if we needed to.
Yeah.
And it's just continued to grow. People have found us by accident, to be honest with you, or referral.
Yeah.
I think we have a pretty great website, but we're beginning to see more and more people coming to us from the website, but we've been in business 11 years. So a lot of it was from referral. And I had a lot of colleagues in my former life too. And so one of those was one of my biggest corporate clients, General Dynamics, who he runs international HR, and he's been, so I did some work for them initially when I first started as a consultant, and they came back and anyway, they've been my client for 11 years.
Yeah, that's amazing. So you've grown with them as they've
I've grown with
too.
them. Exactly. And they've allowed, me with working with them to grow. But we have an entire business systems solution that we designed as ours. And so we have our own international HRIS system that they actually use for about 7,000 of their expatriates, foreign nationals around the world.
Holy cow. That's amazing.
Started with a spreadsheet.
Yes.
Started the spreadsheet. And now it's a cloud-based FedRAMP compliant system.
Yeah. Wow. There's got to be so many things that you look back, I would imagine, and just reflect on in hindsight, right? And I don't know if you've spent time reflecting.
A lot of time.
It's important to do because I think it's very easy to get so focused on what's next versus what was and how you learned and all of that. Looking back, did you ever think that PZI would get to where it is today from when you started?
It's crazy. The country song, Jesus, take the wheel. Oh my gosh, yes, that is me all day, every day, because that's really kind of where things have come for me is, my corporate life, I was extremely a micromanager. When you've got large corporations kind of breathing down your neck, you're a little bit more hands-on than maybe you would be in other environments. And so that's what I was able to learn from that and what not to do.
Yeah.
And I never wanted to do that again. I wanted to make sure that I really help people grow. That's what I was passionate about. Yeah. I could do it by doing international HR. I could do it by doing taxation. I could do it by doing these different things. But my passion was really bringing people in who didn't have this opportunity, never been exposed to it, and then watch them just flourish.
Yeah, yeah. And you talk a lot in your leadership style about empathy and authenticity and honesty and just indirect leadership, and all of these different traits, which I love. We're going to talk about your book in just a second because there's a lot of it that's in that. But I would love to hear your perspective on sort of a culmination of what you've learned with this international experience. And what are some of those big things looking at other leaders that, just looking around, we'll just use Huntsville as an example. We've got a lot of companies here doing some big things internationally, nationally, locally. What are some of the things that you kind of look around and, if you could give 2 or 3 pieces of advice, honestly, based on where your perspective lies, because it's so complex, it's so experienced and seasoned, and you've been fortunate enough to have the ability to touch so many cultures too, which if there's one word I try to root in my kids, it's perspective.
Yes.
And that word is, it's like, oh my gosh, and I would imagine you just have buckets of it, so I would love to hear just your perspective in that regard.
I think having worked internationally with many different cultures around the world, you understand that, if you've only worked in the United States and you only know our culture, even if you have maybe, individuals from other countries working with you, it's not the same thing as if you're physically in that other country.
Yeah.
And I used to tell business travelers all the time who would maybe go on an assignment outside. Going on an assignment is very different than a business trip, where you go and you stay in an American hotel or a Western hotel, you're eating Western food, you're using your Western credit card, and you're speaking English. When you actually move into another country and you understand how they live, how they buy their groceries, what they do for entertainment, how they drive, all these different things that you just take for granted because you're here, it really helps you to understand that empathy a lot more. I know from a standpoint of business, I'm an accountant, so I'm always looking at, compliance. And I used to tell business people all the time that what is compliance in the United States is not compliance necessarily outside the United States. Sometimes it's just a matter of how business is done. We call it corruption, but maybe it's truly just how business is done. Because the difference is so unique. I mean, yes, there's corruption. That's why we have the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. But understanding the difference between a corruption versus how things are done, and it's just done differently.
Yeah.
And sometimes it is about who you know. Mm-hmm. And even here in Huntsville, I'll be honest with you, this is still a town of who you know.
Yeah.
Very much so. Mm-hmm. So coming here, 13 years ago, I didn't know anyone. Had no family, no, business contacts or anything. And it takes time to build those things up.
Yeah.
It's the same in any other culture, but I think it's magnified because they don't move around as much as Americans do.
Mm-hmm. That's really interesting. So let's use this as a segue to get into your book, because I know the book, The Leadership Attitude, which we've talked about, inspiring success through authenticity and passion, which just has a ton of great nuggets and I like it because it's short enough where you can get through it in a quick enough time, but it packs a punch in relation to just the content and the direction and the experience and everything. So I would love to hear sort of what instilled you to write a book.
Sure.
And I would imagine, not to, sugarcoat things, but I would imagine you probably have a lot of people around you saying you should capture your story. You've got amazing things to tell. And I mean, just, with your experience being a military spouse and moving around as much as you have, and then how you, blended that into a very successful career and started a business. And, but what was the moment for you that really triggered you to want to write your own book?
Well, interestingly enough, Forbes had come after me for about 2 years, emailing me, and I'm a small business, so I thought it was just spam. Delete, sure. Who wants to talk to me about writing a book? Of course it is.
Like, surely if Forbes is reaching out, this is not.
Yeah, of course not. So I would delete, and so eventually they did call me, and it's like, okay, I'll take the call, and it's like, well, what are you selling?
Yeah.
And as we got to talking and what had happened, they had found me in researching global successful women who worked for global corporations and had started their own business. That was really what they were focusing on.
Okay.
And that's kind of how I popped into their sphere, of influence. And so talking with them, I just assumed, I figured they probably wanted the Doosan story. That's probably what they really wanted, because it is a unique aspect, of my life. And I'm very fortunate and unfortunate to have had both. Being severed from a company is never fun.
Yeah.
Especially for an executive, but also having that experience of working in another culture outside of the United States, not just in the U.S. with a foreign corporation, but outside and being immersed into that, and having, for 5 years, all of my meetings were in Korean. Mm-hmm. I don't speak Korean. So everything was, I had an interpreter in my ear, literally a person sitting beside me for 5 years.
Oh my gosh.
Interpreting
wow.
as I'm in meetings, not as they finish. No, same time.
Yeah.
Constantly going.
Ooh,
so very, very tough environment. But, I think from the standpoint of what really inspired me to write the book, as we started talking about it, that was the story I thought that they would want, but that's not the story that actually happened. I couldn't even begin to tell you how things that came out of me. And it was about me. Don't get me wrong, it absolutely is. But it was really more about the empathy and the passion about the people. And that's what I had learned.
Yeah.
And it's a lot about my faith and how it related to what I had been reading for the last 10 years. Mm-hmm. And things that have always been there. but we don't pick up the book, we don't read it,
Yeah.
and we don't relate those stories to today.
Yeah.
Well, that was 2,000 years ago. That's not, well, really is, David was a pretty big warrior and had to fight off some pretty big giants.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I feel like I fight corporate giants all day long,
Mm-hmm.
so
Yeah.
is it really that much difference? And that I think was, as we started going through it, that's really what happened with that book.
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, and I think to your point, similar to what we kind of talked on earlier, you have a different perspective at this place in your life, at this
Sure.
season in your life.
Yes.
So looking at something that perhaps you've seen 100 times may come through in a slightly different way.
Absolutely.
Which I think is the beauty of just, evolving as humans, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where to think that we will ever stop learning how to be, different individuals as we go through life is just a foolish thought,
Yeah.
So some of the things that, some of the themes of the book, from head first to head centered leadership, embracing informal leadership, which I know we talked about, humanizing global workplaces, which I love because, globalization demands way more than just systems. It requires empathy and passion and understanding.
Mm-hmm.
And we talked a little bit about this offline previously, but thinking about humanizing global workplaces, this came front and center to me in thinking about how we need a Deborah McGee, overseeing international relations right now as it relates to how can we have more empathy in our dialogue and our conversation and have more time and rest to understand different cultures. That way we can move things forward in the right way. I feel, and I know I'm not the only one, but there's just a lot of harshness and division and tension, and it's really, really hard and it causes fatigue often. And it's just something that I think everybody's just really, really tired of, So I don't know if you were overseeing, international, globalization in relation to this sort of thing, like what, I don't know. What are your thoughts
it's
on
interesting that you say that because during my time when I was working with Doosan, I'm especially then, I'm a very westernized individual, which means I want to get things done. I only have X amount of time and I don't want to waste around with niceties. Let's just move it forward because it needs to happen.
Yeah.
Just move it. That's not how the rest of the world works.
Yeah.
That's only us.
Yeah.
Only we do that. Everyone else actually does take the time to get to know them.
Mm-hmm.
And I talk about it in the book where one of my chief HR officers brought me to Korea and said, listen, you've really alienated these people with this culture because you're not embracing the culture.
You were told this.
I was told this.
Wow.
Yes, I was. Absolutely, I was. And so it's like, huh? What do you mean? I thought everybody back here in the States loves everything I do. My CEO loves what I do. But that culture did not. And so I had to learn. I had to go there and spend time and learn to drink soju and sing karaoke, but that's really to learn how to make amends for so they could get to know me.
Yeah.
And I'm not advocating alcohol, I promise, but I'm just at the time saying that the reality was what was happening was as you let that guard down, they got to know you, and they needed to know you to do business with you to build trust.
Yeah.
And I think international relations, that's what we're missing. We're moving so fast. We just got to get it done. We got 4 years. We got to get this moved out, and that's a very westernized thought process. That is not. I won't even call it Easternized because, to be honest with you, it's the same in Europe. Yeah. You gotta know people. Yeah. You gotta take the time to get to know me as a person,
right? Not
just me as the executive.
Yeah, and I think it comes across if you don't.
Yes.
Right? Especially if you don't attempt to or try to get to know that person, and things just come across as inauthentic,
Absolutely.
I have to ask, when you were doing that and letting your guard down a little bit, was there a go-to karaoke song that you leaned on?
100 on Hotel California every time.
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah. That's a good one. I'm a Whitney Houston gal myself, so anytime there's karaoke, I've actually got a list on my phone of karaoke songs ready to go.
Our VP, Michelle Nash, has a karaoke room in her house. So we're serious about karaoke.
Oh my gosh, that is a different episode, but I am loving that so much. Well, I love this. And I think, so the book is out. Go get it. The Leadership Attitude, Inspiring Success Through Authenticity and Passion. And we'll definitely link the book as well.
Thank you.
When we promote this. But again, just really, really great leadership tips, but coming from just so much perspective and seasoned experience. And that is such a value add that a lot of people don't have the ability to take advantage of, honestly.
Yeah.
So I think it's just beautiful that you've been able to turn that into a successful career and build a booming business and hang out on the lake all the time, So
Exactly.
I know I have to ask, what's next for you now that the book is out and the business is doing great? And,
Well, I'm really, we're working hard internally to bring up that next level of management because, Michelle and I both want to do other things too.
Yeah.
And we know that's where that has to be. And so we're putting a lot of emphasis into our leadership and, making sure that we're empowering them to do the next level. And then afterwards, well, I think I might like to speak a little bit more. I think I enjoy it.
Yeah. Well, and you have so many things to bring to the table about, again, empathy. And I loved your, the year of yes or the time of yes. Saying, what did you?
Right. Just say yes.
Just say yes.
Just say yes.
Yeah. And it's amazing what can happen when you just open your mind and heart to things around you, and
especially when you don't plan it.
Yeah.
It's even better when you don't plan it. It's like, well, I guess I could.
Yeah. A little scary, but,
okay.
Take a risk.
Yeah, take a risk.
I love that. Well, kudos to you and congratulations for everything that you've achieved.
Thank you.
And we are so appreciative of you joining us today and spending some time. And it's been a real pleasure getting to know you. So
this has been great.
Yeah, awesome.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. All right. We'll see you guys next time.